The Mongol Empire's expansion across Asia and Europe during the 13th century remains one of the most extraordinary chapters in world history. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongols forged a vast empire that spanned from the steppes of Central Asia to the heart of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Their military tactics and relentless drive for conquest reshaped the world order, as the Mongols swept through Persia, Russia, and China with unprecedented speed and efficiency. Yet, as the Mongol Empire grew, so too did its ambitions. By the middle of the century, the Mongol Empire's rulers, particularly in the Ilkhanate, began to set their sights on the Holy Land, a region long contested by the Crusader States and the Muslim world. The Mongols, previously known for their brutality and demand for submission, found themselves considering an unusual diplomatic strategy, an alliance with the Christian kingdoms of the Crusader States. This was an alliance that seemed as improbable as it was ambitious. After all, the Mongols had already devastated much of the Muslim world, and the Crusaders were the Christian warriors committed to retaking the Holy Land from the Muslims. Yet, despite their differences and contrasting goals, the Mongols and Crusaders found themselves momentarily aligned, driven by a shared enemy, the Mamluks. This diplomatic effort to forge an alliance between two of the most powerful, yet disparate, forces of the 13th century is a remarkable, though often overlooked, episode in medieval history. It speaks to the fluidity of geopolitics in the Middle Ages and highlights the complexities of strategic alliances that were not simply based on religious or cultural commonalities, but rather on practical considerations and shared objectives. The Mongols, once enemies of Christianity, began to see the Crusader states as potential allies, not just as enemies of their Muslim foes. But as we delve deeper into the diplomatic history of the Mongol-Crusader interactions, we will see that, despite their initial attempts, the alliance failed to materialize, and the reasons behind this failure are both intriguing and illuminating. The roots of the Mongol-Crusader dialogue can be traced back to the 1250s when the Mongols began to focus their attention on the Middle East. The Mongol Empire, which had already conquered vast swaths of territory, had begun to split into four major khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Golden Horde in Russia, and the Ilkhanate in Persia. The Ilkhanate, under the leadership of Hulagu Khan, began to see itself as a power that could challenge the Mamluks, the ruling Muslim dynasty in Egypt. By the time Hulagu led his forces into Persia and Syria, the Crusader states in the Levant were already fighting a losing battle against the Mamluks and their growing power. In this context, the Mongols saw an opportunity to weaken the Mamluks by forming an alliance with the Crusaders, who, despite their weakened state, still controlled key territories in the Holy Land. For the Mongols, the Crusaders represented a potential strategic partner in their efforts to break the Mamluk stranglehold over the region. Hulagu, the Ilkhanate ruler, was aware that defeating the Mamluks would require more than just Mongol military power. The Mongols understood that alliances were crucial to their success, and they realized that the Crusaders, despite being divided and weakened, were still capable of providing valuable support. In fact, the Mongols saw themselves as potential liberators of the Holy Land, offering military support to the Crusaders in exchange for cooperation. This was a significant shift in Mongol strategy. The Mongols, traditionally seen as ruthless conquerors who demanded submission, were now looking to establish diplomatic relations based on mutual benefits. The Mongols sent emissaries to the Crusader states in the mid-1250s, signaling their desire to establish an alliance. The Mongol envoys made it clear that their goal was not to conquer the Crusader states, but rather to unite forces against a common enemy, the Mamluks. This was a bold move, as it marked the first time that the Mongols sought to align themselves with Christian powers. Their message was simple: a joint effort could lead to the defeat of the Mamluks, thus ensuring the survival of the Crusader states and securing Mongol dominance in the region. The Crusaders, who were facing a growing Muslim threat, were initially intrigued by the idea of an alliance with the Mongols. It was a tempting proposition. The Mongols had a reputation for military superiority, and their defeat of the Mamluks could provide the Crusaders with the opportunity to regain lost territories in the Holy Land. Despite the Mongols' ambitious overtures, the response from the Crusader states was less enthusiastic than the Mongols had hoped. Several factors contributed to this skepticism. First, many Crusader leaders were suspicious of the Mongols' motives. The Crusaders had spent decades fighting Muslim forces in the Holy Land, and now they were being asked to join forces with the very people who had previously ravaged Muslim lands. The idea of cooperating with the Mongols seemed unthinkable to some, especially given the Mongols' reputation for brutality. Many Crusader leaders were also reluctant to abandon their religious and cultural convictions. The Crusades had been framed as a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem, and the idea of aligning with a non-Christian power was seen as a betrayal of the Crusader cause. To some, the Mongols were little more than pagans, and forming an alliance with them seemed sacrilegious. Furthermore, there was also a sense of disillusionment among the Crusaders. The Crusader states had been in a state of decline for many years, and the idea of relying on a foreign power for their survival seemed increasingly unappealing. The Crusader states had become fragmented and divided, and the thought of placing their fate in the hands of the Mongols, a distant and unfamiliar power, was not an easy pill to swallow. Crusader leaders were also divided in their response to the Mongol overtures. Some were more receptive to the idea of an alliance, while others remained firmly opposed. This lack of unity among the Crusader states further hindered any possibility of a successful Mongol-Crusader partnership. Despite these challenges, the Mongols persisted in their diplomatic efforts. Hulagu Khan sent emissaries to Pope Urban IV, seeking to gain papal approval for a Mongol-Crusader alliance. In 1263, the Pope responded by sending his own envoys to meet with the Mongols in the hope of understanding their true intentions. The Pope's response, however, was cautious and noncommittal. The papacy was not yet ready to fully embrace the idea of an alliance with the Mongols, and the Crusaders in the Holy Land remained divided on the issue. In the meantime, the Mongols pressed on with their campaign against the Mamluks, hoping to prove their military strength and secure the Crusaders' cooperation. The Mongol-Crusader dialogue reached a critical juncture in 1260 when the Mongols, under the command of Hulagu, engaged the Mamluks at the Battle of Ain Jalut in Palestine. This battle would prove to be one of the most significant turning points in the history of the Mongol Empire's campaign in the Middle East. In what would be a shocking defeat, the Mamluks crushed the Mongol forces, halting their advance into the Levant. This victory by the Mamluks was a devastating blow to the Mongols' ambitions in the region, and it signaled the beginning of the end for any hope of a successful Mongol-Crusader alliance. The outcome of the Battle of Ain Jalut not only devastated the Mongols, but also dramatically altered the dynamics of power in the Middle East. The Mamluks had successfully defended their territory, and the Mongol threat to the Holy Land was now significantly diminished. For the Crusaders, the failure of the Mongol campaign against the Mamluks rendered any potential alliance with the Mongols less relevant. The Crusader states, already facing internal divisions, saw the Mamluks as the more immediate and pressing threat, and the idea of aligning with the Mongols seemed less appealing in the wake of their defeat. With the Mongols no longer able to provide significant military support, the Crusader states were left to fend for themselves in the face of Mamluk advances. The dream of a Mongol-Crusader alliance had faded, and the Crusader states were left to struggle against the Mamluks without the promised Mongol aid. The failure of the Mongol-Crusader partnership was a significant moment in medieval history, illustrating the complexities of diplomacy in a world where alliances could shift as quickly as military fortunes. In the end, the Mongol-Crusader alliance never materialized. The failure of the diplomatic efforts between the two powers was due to a combination of factors, including cultural and religious differences, political divisions within the Crusader states, and the shifting dynamics of power in the Middle East. The Mongols, despite their military prowess, were unable to overcome the challenges of forming a lasting alliance with the Crusaders, and the Crusaders, despite their initial interest, were unwilling to embrace a partnership with a foreign, non-Christian power. The legacy of the Crusader-Mongol alliance is one of lost opportunity. Had the two powers managed to overcome their differences and forged a united front against the Mamluks, the course of history in the Middle East could have been dramatically altered. The Crusader states, with Mongol support, might have been able to regain lost territory, and the Mamluks could have been defeated earlier. However, history is shaped by the decisions and actions of individuals, and in this case, the failure of the Mongol-Crusader alliance was the result of a series of missed opportunities and misunderstandings. The story of the Crusader-Mongol alliance serves as a reminder of the complexities of medieval geopolitics, where alliances were often based on pragmatic considerations rather than ideological or religious unity. It also underscores the unpredictable nature of history, where even the most powerful empires can falter in the face of unexpected challenges. The Crusader-Mongol alliance is a fascinating episode in the history of the medieval world. It highlights the complexities of diplomacy during a time of shifting power dynamics, and reveals the challenges that even the most powerful empires faced in trying to form lasting partnerships. The failure of this alliance is a testament to the difficulty of forging cooperation between cultures that were, at their core, deeply divided. Despite their shared goals, the Mongols and Crusaders were ultimately unable to overcome their differences, and the alliance that could have changed the course of history was never meant to be.